Hi there, welcome to the Real Estate Sections webinar. Today we're looking at digital assets in a material world, and we'll be discussing crypto and blockchain when it comes to real estate transactions. A couple of things, the co-chairs are Howard Gould and Elizabeth Dryden. Our next webinar is June 16, where they'll be looking at recent developments in commercial leasing. Also, mentoring, it's something really important to the group if you can help out some of the newly qualified lawyers and law students. And Alexander Rufus Isaacs is the person to contact about that. I think they're going to put his email in the Q&A. And then lastly, special thanks today for Lavon Lawson, who was instrumental in getting all of this together for this really fascinating topic. So I'm Catherine Ross. I'm with Sotheby's in Beverly Hills, and I'll turn it over just to introduce the speakers. Rebecca, start with you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Castaneda. I am with the Castaneda law firm based in Tampa, Florida. We practice worldwide. A huge focus of ours is international criminal defense. So we do drug trafficking defense, money laundering defense, and weapons trafficking defense. We do international business transactions and assist with investments. And we recently, in the last year and a half, started doing cryptocurrency compliance and law. Thomas?
Awesome. My name's, how's everyone doing today? My name's Thomas Gaffney. I'm an attorney based out of Los Angeles, California. My firm is Olsen and Brueggemann. We're based out of Manhattan Beach. We do a wide variety of things, more of a boutique style firm. I started my own kind of practice that I've been building for a while. I've been in the cryptocurrency game for a long time. Since 2012 is when I bought my first Bitcoin. And so it's been quite a wild ride, and I've been transitioning that crypto love for kind of crypto and blockchain technology and just technology in general to my actual practice in real life as an attorney. And so I essentially represent Web3 startups, and I do startup financing, trying to help kind of like a bunch of PE funds and a bunch of startups mainly in general that are doing like Web3 tech. And so really excited to be here and can't wait for the talk.
Great, thank you. Thomas, perhaps you could start us off like right at the basics. What is cryptocurrency? Can you distinguish between the speculative and then the stable coin?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So cryptocurrency is essentially based on blockchain or DLT, aka distributed ledger technology, that is a cryptographic form of an algorithm that kind of makes this immutable ledger, right? So that you have some transactions going back and forth. So the first one ever was Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is one of the most prominent currencies that exists out there, the most prominent currency that exists out there. But that is not, there's a little bit of a difference between what is called a stable coin. So something that some people might have heard like recently in the news, the UST Terra or the Luna project, which lost its peg, which is what is supposed to be pegged to $1. And so that ended up crashing. There was a liquidation event that caused significant damage to the actual protocol itself, and that caused the actual bank funds that were backing the Luna project and the Terra project to be liquidated, essentially similar to what happened to Bear Stearns or the Lehman Brothers during 2008. So it's actually a pretty hot topic to talk about because it's actually pretty relevant with what happened in the past and how it affected like mortgage-backed securities. And so, but what a stable coin is essentially it's rather than Bitcoin, which has fluctuated from less than $1 to over what, $69,000 per coin. A stable coin is supposed to be stable, exactly in the same name, right? So it fluctuates a little bit, kind of like how the dollar fluctuates against other currencies, but it is in theory supposed to stay around $1 because that's what most of these current stable coins peg themselves to, is similar to the dollar, so that instead of having these huge fluctuations in price between, say, Bitcoin and Ethereum, it's supposed to stay stable. So one of the most prominent ones is Tether Usdt, which is different than UST, which was the Luna and Terra project that recently had failed in the last 2 weeks basically, but it's all over the news, so check it out.
Yeah, had so much press, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a really popular, hot button item right now.
And what about if we go starting to look at the applications? One question I'm always asked is about the risk. You know, who is bearing the risk in a real estate transaction if they offer in a cryptocurrency?
Well, this depends, and I think Rebecca will be really great to speak on this one, just because she's done several transactions with the cryptocurrencies and some of these stable coins that we're talking about. So, Rebecca, you wanna take that?
Sure. Yes. So I think it's like with any transaction, there's always risk, and it has to be determined who's going to take on the risk. So in the cryptocurrency transactions I have done, they've been real estate and then a handful of investments. So with the real estate, it's spelled out in the contract, and we actually have, if we want to pull it up now or later, an example of what it looks like, and put it in writing so it's very clear.
There we go.
So I do a lot of work in Panama, Colombia, and this is a contract for a real estate purchase in Panama. Client is Australian, seller is Venezuelan, property is located in Panama. It's not a law school exam question, but it kind of felt like it a little bit. So this contract was originally in Spanish. It's been translated into English. So if you notice the wording's a bit different or doesn't flow kind of like the contracts that we all do in the States, that's why. So this is a contract for a penthouse in Panama. You can actually own things via corporation. And instead of conducting a transaction transfer of sale, like we would think you would do, this is a residence, person to person or business to business, and then you have taxes. In Panama, you're able to actually substitute a member of a corporation, and it then transfers ownership. So that's what we did here. It transferred ownership of a corporation. The corporate officers were changed out. There's a few documents not included in this to reflect that, but that contract is written to reflect what I just said. So it's noted a little bit differently here, but so we have spelled out your basic real estate contract clauses. We scroll down just a little bit to the section that's highlighted in yellow right here. This is what differentiates this contract from an average contract that I would do for a client. And in this, we talk about the transfer of shares, the corporate shares. This contract was for $2.3 million. And in it, we spelled out that we would be using USDT, and that when the payment was made, transferred from one wallet address to another, that the party transferring it took on the risk of sending it to the correct wallet address and the correct cryptocurrency type, because as maybe some people know or don't know, if you don't get that correct, your money's gone. It's a very expensive mistake, and not one that I would like to have happen to me personally doing it or my clients. This particular, both of these clients, it probably wouldn't matter too much if they accidentally did that. But
can you expand on that a little bit, Rebecca, where
Sure.
you since you use USDT, right? That is
Yes.
Tether, essentially,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so Tether is a stable coin, kind of what we had talked about before. And so you were stating that it's really important to make sure that you send it to the right address, correct?
Right address and the right crypto type. Yes.
Yes.
So this was USDT.
So
Which
why is that important?
So the way that wallet addresses work, if you say Bitcoin to a different wallet address, you're trying to send Bitcoin to someone's USDT wallet address, it's gone depending upon how you do your transaction. All the ways that my clients move money around, it's gone, it's lost, it's just lost, at least for right now, it's lost forever.
Yes.
So USDT was utilized because the smallest amount of fluctuation. So this particular client had 40 million in Bitcoin and cashed out a little bit of it using USDT, and then transferred to the other client's USDT wallet. And we did a test payment of $10,000 to make sure that we had everybody's information correct. And I knew it'd be fine, but I always hold my breath anytime I transfer money, regardless of the amount. And so we tested it, obviously applying that towards the purchase price.
You tested it with what? Sending small amounts of Tether to the Tether address to make sure that it was the accurate one, similar to how you confirm like a bank account, right? Setting up like say Venmo. Right. Or something.
Usually we do $1 or $10. This group of people does 10,000.
Awesome.
And it was, it was smooth, seamless, everything was smooth, but we spelled it out, and we spelled it on the contract that if you send the wrong type of crypto to the wrong address, whoever's sending it to the wrong person, or, if you give the wrong address, like, hey, here's my USDT, but it's not really yours, you just lost out on the purchase price.
Yeah.
So we made sure to put that in there. And both of these clients are well known to me. They're not known to each other. And so everyone we were patient, and just, it was a business transaction for both of them. And we agreed to, if you see the language, that whoever the seller receives it, it's 2.3 million at the time it's sent, but in 5 seconds, it could be 4 million, or it could be $4. And we put that in there too, that he understood that it's going to go up or down, and that he understood, that's the risk. So that's a bit different than, obviously wiring just straight currency, US currency, to a bank account. So just spelling it out is very, very important. I had another real estate transaction for the same client that purchased this property. It was actually in Orange County. We did 2 transactions for him using crypto, and the proof of funds, the seller, I think, was almost 70, or it still is 70, he's still alive, but, and he just didn't believe that this was real. Just thought this was not going to happen. No, you're not actually buying my property with crypto. So I had to do kind of your KYC, know your customer, know your client, documentation. So we had to show proof of a wallet address that had enough for this purchase. And then I had to put it on my letterhead and send it. And that's what we utilized, because, it's not just like a regular bank account or this particular client's independently wealthy from crypto. So it's not like he had a pay stub that said, I make this, and this is what's held.
And that's I'll just plug in something real quick. And that's one of the interesting things, right? Is that because in traditional financial systems, right, you have a bank, which is very centralized, where they open bank accounts. They're the ones that make the controls. They do the wires. They have all the authorizations. They do and make sure everything's correct. So that's why when you're purchasing land, sometimes you have to go to a notary, you have to sit down, they'll do the wires, they'll make sure all the information's correct, and you put it in escrow and all that stuff. We still have escrow with the decentralized way, but the decentralized version, which is what Rebecca has done here, is the USDT, right? And so you don't have that centralized authority to make sure that all these bells and whistles and everything's going through accordingly, right? It's kind of put a lot more onus on the actual purchasers, rather than using some type of authority that can, if we send to the wrong bank account, a bank account can just pull those funds back out. Whereas, as Rebecca was explaining earlier, that if you use the wrong wallet address, there is no central authority to just take that money back, right? Like, so you have to be a little more careful, and you have to make sure that you're crafting these things in the agreement, which is why I think you did a really good job. Because the weight of the risk on the transfer of money is significantly different than in a traditional transaction. And
so they're completely anonymous then, the wallets?
They can be. The wallets aren't necessarily completely anonymous. It depends on what you're going through. Like, yes, you can create a completely anonymous wallet, but I'm sure, as Rebecca, you do financial crimes and money laundering, right? You have a lot of fictitious accounts in traditional banking, right? And so how you launder money for a lot of versions is you run money through one bank account, and then you clean it by going and sending it to smaller amounts to a bunch of different bank accounts, and you buy stuff, and then you funnel money in multiple different ways, correct? And so there are some KYC chains that are available, right? That you actually have to input your personal identification information. But at the same time, yes, like your wallet is just usually a 26 to 48 digit number that is specific to you, that no one knows. But if they know that that's your wallet and they know that you transact with it, they'll know that it belongs to you, right? And so that's where the anonymous comes from.
And we put the wallet address in for where to send the funds, not where they were coming from.
Okay.
And then everybody double check it. Like, this is correct, right? And this is it. And then obviously I had the client move the funds. You move it to this wallet to wallet. And that's how we did it. Yeah. And on this transaction, the seller was older, and he really genuinely didn't believe that this was going to go through. So he was very nervous. So I did as much documentation as possible. And then this client was delayed in sending the funds by a couple days. And so we got a notice like, hey, we're basically canceling the contract. And we had to kind of hold his hand, like, hold on, it's coming. And we had to exercise an additional like 2 or 3 days. And the seller for the contract that we were looking at now is 30 years younger than the Orange County gentleman. And he was fine. That client, I think, was a day late, but he wasn't sweating it at all. So I think that there's that mentality too of what is crypto, and is this really real? But then this client that purchased the Orange County property bought a second one from the same seller, and it was smooth sailing. It was no issue. And I don't even think we sent some of the same documentation just to, show that he was legitimate. It was fine. So, we opened some eyes, which was neat.
Yeah.
So a question about the motivations of the parties to actually use crypto. Are you finding it's more the sellers or the purchasers?
In my experience, it's the purchasers. That's who I represent. I find people to be very nervous to receive crypto. I've assisted with car transactions. I have a client that is very into hypercars. He's bought around 35 million in cars in the last, I guess at this point, probably a year. I've helped with all those transactions. And some car dealerships are like, what? And they're very, and I just do the same thing as the real estate transactions. This is the form of payment. This is, and no one's turned it down. But some people, we had one seller I had to educate a touch. He wanted to charge a 25% transaction fee for accepting crypto. And we're not doing that. I'm not doing that. The clients aren't doing that. That's crazy. Yeah. It's a mentality thing, I think, too, that as people do it more. And the parties for this contract we're looking at here to receive crypto, Panama is not as forward-leaning as El Salvador, which now grants citizenship based upon if you're basically a Bitcoin or crypto millionaire, you can actually get citizenship based on that. Basically, let's bring your money to our country. All the drug cartels gone. It's not, but Panama, so this particular client lives and works in Panama, and Panama is becoming more and more open to it. And he wanted to receive funds that way to utilize it for business. Panama actually passed their version of the Senate/House, just went through a bill that was proposed, and it hasn't yet been ratified, but to allow cryptocurrency in the country. Panama is a huge banking country. It's a country of convenience for many reasons, but everybody knows Panama for banking, a little bit similar to Cyprus. And so this particular client lives and works there and wanted to just utilize it for business transactions. And actually since then has done very well with the funds from this sale.
That's really interesting. I can definitely see that as well. I mean, in terms of the seller's just gonna, if the seller wants crypto, right? If they are saying, oh, you can only purchase this in cryptocurrency, that limits the amount of buyers you have out there, right? So in my kind of view, and what I've kind of seen is that if you're saying, oh, I'm only selling this house in Bitcoin, I mean, how many people are going to be willing to actually just go out and buy Bitcoin, right? So it kind of limits your market. So it kind of goes to the mindset like Rebecca was talking about. But because at the same time, if they want to go and transfer the USD that they get into Bitcoin later, I mean, they can do that incredibly fast, especially if they're using some, if it's a large transaction, say in the 30s of millions, you can get over-the-counter kind of trades from like institutional style stuff. So I know Coinbase has Coinbase Institution, where they act as the mediator for large market trades rather than putting that directly onto, say, a market maker. So something like Binance, or just Coinbase's traditional trading markets, like how Robinhood operates, or E-Trade, something like that. You have a big market maker, and if you're making a large transaction, you could end up wiping out the entire order book, right, and causing a crash of the price. So you're going to have to go through some type of larger intermediary, like Coinbase Institution, to make these larger purchases, where they're going to say Bitcoin's price, like, so today it's at like what, 30,000, right? They would have like $20-30 million worth of Bitcoin that they can sell you at that exact price, probably for some type of fee, to kind of transition your money from, say, United States dollars into Bitcoin pretty seamlessly afterwards. So that's why I can see the sellers being willing to accept more things, but the buyers wanting to use cryptocurrency more prominently.
Definitely. So if we just come back to California, can I ask about the transactions you've had here? Rebecca, do you start normally with the standard car forms, or is it a separate contract?
You know, the ones in California that we've done, it was your traditional regular real estate contract, and then there's a section for payment, and it just reflects that that's how it's going to be paid, and very similar language. It's the title companies and escrow that are then like, wait, what? So then you just hold a different set of hands. But it's almost, I mean, it's almost your standard real estate contract in California. This particular one in Panama, they do business a bit different, obviously corporations, but at least my experience in handling the transactions, I've handled about, let's see, one client bought a bunch of real estate lots for 29. I think I've done 32 transactions in the last year. And it was just more education. I spend half of I think my discussions educating people, which is great. But it's like, this is real, this is how we're going to do this. And then everyone learns, and it's a little more, I don't want to say it's fun, I guess. It's more fun than your traditional, like, okay, we're going to do this and that. It's kind of fun to be like, hey, crypto. And they're like, what?
I think that's actually a really good segue into one of the questions we have in the chat. It's from Sarah Johnson. She said, what if you used Bitcoins, ? Would you draft the price clause in USD or whatever the equivalent value, close quotes, in Bitcoins, ? To contract out the fixed rate, the fixed risk? And so I would think that it would be a negotiation standpoint, obviously, with the two parties. So if the seller, say that, and this is going back to what we were talking about, whether the seller would list a price in crypto or if the buyer would want to. So, but if the seller says, hey, I just want 1,000 Bitcoins for this home, right? I mean, you can put that into the contract clause, but then the buyer might have to come back and say, well, I mean, 1,000 Bitcoins could be $66 million or $30 million based on the fluctuation of the market within a week while we're waiting in escrow or waiting for title, right? So you would have to have a negotiation standpoint. And there's some people out there that live, eat, and breathe Bitcoin. That's all they do. They just accept Bitcoin constantly. And so they don't take it as the value of what it's trading at for USD. They take it at the 1-for-1 trade of 1 Bitcoin for 1 Bitcoin. So eventually, as the market grows and expands and matures, you would think that the price of Bitcoin would become more stable, and it actually has over the last 10 years. As I've witnessed it. I mean, I've seen 98% swings in Bitcoin in a month, right? Yeah, we're in the middle of a crash right now, but everything's crashing. You know what I mean? It's not just Bitcoin, and Bitcoin has actually kind of gone parallel with the market. It's dipped a little more as tech has dipped a little more, but in terms of like overall fluctuations, Bitcoin's starting to stable out. So it's one of those things that I can see in the future. Bitcoin's price would be, instead of swinging potentially 50-60%, it's swinging between 20 to 10. And then 100 years from now, if Bitcoin's still around, who knows, if some technology comes, wipes it out, whatever's going to happen. But eventually, it would ideally like to stabilize between a 5 to 10% swing in a given month and track kind of like more traditional markets, because the asset class is going to mature and materialize. So, but with these early transactions, it's something you have to think about, definitely. So if you are working with Bitcoin specifically, and if that's going to be written in the contract, you have to make sure that those like potential issues are addressed, because otherwise you could find yourself in a heat of a mess real quick.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I don't like surprise arrests, surprise extraditions, or surprise prices. So we go with price in our contracts so that everything is just very clear, and you're getting benefit of the bargain.
Mhm.
You know, I could see potential issues with someone saying, I want one Bitcoin for my house, and then the value drops. And then, you know, then you have litigation because, well, we all thought it was going to stay like this. And who wants that? You don't need that. But it, you know, like Tom said, it depends on the seller and the buyer and who's, you know, who wants what.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of people have been using stable coins, right? Because you have your proof of ownership and your proof of funds, right? Immediately, right? So it's kind of like a bank account, just saying, hey, this is all my money. It's right here. Here it is, ready to go in the stable coin. And that's one of the benefits kind of using a stable coin and a cryptocurrency as opposed to traditional currencies. So it's interesting.
Yeah, you touched on the escrow companies. I guess that they're not very au fait at the moment with using crypto in California.
I have a few times, but it's not seamless. It's just, again, educating conversation, and then following up. I find I'm not sure why it's so different to them if it's translating into their account just the same way you would a wire. I think it's knowledge and a risk. I think they just question something different. Is my experience.
It's definitely something that's going to have to evolve over time, right? Because like Rebecca said, it's about education and understanding. I mean, this technology is incredibly new. It's incredibly volatile, and it provides a little more risk than what traditional markets have seen, right? And so there are cryptocurrency escrow companies out there today making escrow companies specifically just for crypto, right? So I think it's something that's just going to take time, and it's something that's going to eventually evolve over the development and the growth of the technology, blockchain or DLT itself.
And then perhaps, Thomas, you probably see that more on the security side rather than the real estate side.
Right now, yes, that is evolving significantly, right? Because the securities, I mean, because you got to look at these cryptocurrencies, right? Like a lot of them are being used as securities, like flat out. That's just how they're doing. They're using crowdsourced funding. People are going out and starting projects, launching a coin for a decentralized project that exists on a blockchain, but they're using the cryptocurrency coin to get in if it's initial funds to help fund the project, right? And so it's kind of wild to see on the security side, because the regulators are kind of just letting a lot of this happen because they want the technology developed. So you have a lot of these players who traditionally have been excluded from having an IPO because they don't have a large enough company, they don't have a large enough influence, that they aren't as prominent developers. But now they're being able to go out and crowdsource funds with a community that they've built, right? That is much smaller, but at the same time, not necessarily less important. It's just something that has slowly grown over time for this little aspects of the industry to be able to make products and make applications that can slowly grow and actually help the economy grow itself and help the crypto industry grow within itself. So it's really fascinating what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, should we turn over to start talking about the blockchain?
Sure. In what aspect?
Firstly, what is it? That's the biggest question that I'm always asked.
So what is it? Rebecca, you want me to take this, or you can take it?
Yes, that's all you.
Okay, cool. All right. So what is a blockchain, right? A blockchain is essentially just a ledger. It is just a recording of transactions. That's all it is, except it's immutable and it's run through cryptographic means. And it's essentially a memory, like an Excel sheet, if you really think about it, but in a very sophisticated way. And so what you have is like a bunch of, I'll use Bitcoin as an example, just because it's the most prominent one. You have a bunch of computers that are running algorithms to solve these problems, right? This hypothetical math algorithm problems that exist out in the cloud, essentially, right? And so if Rebecca has 1 Bitcoin and she wants to buy my painting back here for 1 Bitcoin, she's going to send that to my wallet address, like we talked about before with the USDT, and from her wallet address. And what's going to happen is it exists in this little kind of world, this just internet digital cloud world, where the computers that are mining this information, that are going and trying to solve these problems, are going to dissect it, assign a code to it, put it on this ledger that we were talking about, and record that information so that it's kind of there forever. And with the Bitcoin network, every 10 minutes, the network reads its entire self and then confirms all the transactions, so that if there's if there is ever any outliers, they get rejected, and it's just making this immutable ledger that you cannot change. So it's just recording all this information. It's one of those things that it's essentially like the foundations of creating a memory for artificial intelligence, right? So you have traditional internet, right, where you have this web, what's called Web 2, where you go on Wikipedia. You know how everyone can change Wikipedia? You can just go on, you're like, oh, change the information. Whereas on blockchains, you can't do that without having a consensus from all of the other computers to be able to say, oh, this is correct. It's basically just a system of checks and balances that records all this information, which is why having internet money now is now feasible, right? Because one of the biggest problems for the internet and making money on it is the double spend problem. And blockchain had solved that. So the double spend problem is, I make a digital dollar, right? Just a picture of it. It's like, oh, here's my digital dollar. Here you go. That digital dollar everywhere. And there's no way to confirm whether or not it's real, whether or not it's the original, whether or not it's been faked. And now, since it's got this memory, right, of this immutable ledger that has all the transactions that's ever been recorded ever on the blockchain network, you can create one Bitcoin, and you can prove on the internet with Web3 that if the coin that Rebecca sent me, the Bitcoin, to buy this painting is actually legit. It's actually real because it's on this ledger, and it's shown that Rebecca owns this coin. And then as soon as she sends it to me within the next 10 minutes, now I own that coin forever. And then I would be responsible for sending that picture. And that could be part of the smart contract that's written into the blockchain to Rebecca. And then Rebecca's smart contract would be on that ledger as well, that can't be immutable, that says she is the owner of this picture. And that is essentially kind of how blockchain works. It's a little bit more sophisticated than that, but in a sense, that's how the recording's done. And that's why it's important, is because down the road, right, you're ideally going to be able to have smart contracts. So the contract that Rebecca just showed us as an NFT that's on the blockchain that can't be changed. You know that for a fact that this is the contract right here. This is the contract of deed of sale between Rebecca and Thomas for this painting for 1 Bitcoin. You can pull up the ledger that shows it to everyone, read the terms and information. Okay, I know for a fact that this one is real. Now Rebecca can go take this and flip it, say, for 100 Bitcoin, because some super famous person made that. And now Rebecca has a proof of authenticity that this is real. It belongs to her. She paid this much for it. And then she can now trade that to someone else. So that is one of the most prominent things that Bitcoin is having, especially not Bitcoin, but blockchain or DLT technology is slowly progressing with, in terms of like real world applications, is because of this smart contract and NFT technology that's really starting to become prominent.
I'll just add, the United States government is trying to utilize this technology to track military equipment, ammo, weapons, you name it. And then people are trying to utilize it to authenticate things just in general, not just like your Bitcoin, but like, you scan, like Starbucks or something like that, and you can see that's a legitimate product. You buy a Louis Vuitton bag or any, luxury item. Is it real? Is it not real? And there's technology building with a lot of people interested in that, because when you spend a sizable amount, and sizable depends on what your budget is, it varies, authenticating something to be real and true is very important. So there's a handful of luxury brands interested in putting this technology to work. And then the United States government itself is looking to do it too, which just, I think, bigger picture of like, where's crypto law going? Gives validity to this whole world, which for many years, I don't know, not even many years, a decade and a half, people think, oh, if you're using crypto, you're like abusing and selling children and you know, you're a doper, which dopers do use it, but that's not the only people that use it. And so I think that overall big picture of like what blockchain is, you know, it's legitimizing this entire world, which I think is great. I will add for those, since this is a huge chunk, this is a group of lawyers, being mindful of where your funds come from and how you use them and what you do on behalf of a client. But everything in writing, we all do that, but I'm going to reiterate it. And then your proof of funds should not change just because your client is paying in crypto. The IRS has put together a task force that's been working for about 1.5 years, and they are targeting people operating in the crypto world. My office thinks, I have a retired IRS special agent that works for me as an investigator and an attorney. He's worked in public corruption and drug trafficking and money laundering his entire career. We think that they're looking to make a few examples out of some people. So that shouldn't change what you're doing. You should already be doing, your checks and balances and legitimate process. But just for this group to know that that's something, just like with drug trafficking, there's task force that go after people, pushing cocaine a certain way or arms or whatever it may be. Crypto is not going to be any different. So do your due diligence, make sure you know where your funds are coming from, make sure you know the client. Obviously, don't take funds or work a transaction where someone just off the street calls you and says, I want to do this transaction with Bitcoin. I would really, really caution you to know your client, demand proof of funds, IDs, do all the things you would normally do. Because that, I think, is going to be the next thing that's on the horizon is somebody being made an example of for not paying taxes. It's IRS task force that's doing it. And nobody wants to be in the news for that reason. So.
Oh,
exactly.
I can echo that.
I think actually Lavon was talking about a follow-up program that we could put on, because there's so much material there with tax and the implications, the regulations rather. I think that's coming up in the wings.
Awesome.
Oh, I agree. And just to echo what Rebecca said, KYC is going to be a really big thing in crypto moving forward, especially as it moves forward. You're going to want to look at, so the term in the crypto world is called doxed, right? So there are so many projects out there that are selling NFTs or creating their meme coins or doing all these things. If you're working with a project that isn't doxed, aka KYC, knowing who these people are, providing their identities, providing proof of funds and where it came from, it can be very interesting. You wouldn't think that maybe a terrorist organization created an NFT project to sell out and fund over in the United States so that they can have funds to purchase weapons, purchase illicit illegal like information and illegal activities, right? And so it's something that is going to be very big in the future. I think just because this is a really easy way for just how popular this is. You've never been able to move money or fake money or monopoly money, whatever you want to call it, but people are putting value on these things and they are purchasing these things. So you really do have to know who you're engaging in business with, because it could come bite you in the end if you're not doing your KYC, especially very large transactions. So Rebecca hit that on the head, the nail on the head. So it's good.
Back to regulations. So Governor Newsom had an executive order out the other day. Do you think this will start to speed up the regulations for crypto?
Yeah, I would think so. Like I said before, I think that the cryptocurrency industry needs regulations. It just does, right? Like I think it would. Even though I'm big into crypto and a lot of people in crypto don't really want regulations, I'm a huge proponent for regulation because it legitimizes the industry. It gets out the bad actors and it solidifies the people who are trying to do the right thing. They now have rules to follow so that they can say, hey, my project's real. I'm doing the right thing, right? So I think that right now the SEC is kind of in the Commodity Futures Exchange, the Treasury, the DOJ, whoever's going to be creating these regulations and enforcing it. I think what they're doing is allowing the technology to grow and develop. So they don't want to hit regulations too hard, too fast, because otherwise that's going to stunt the growth of the technology, because people like Joe Smith, that he's just working out of his garage trying to build something, he's not going to have the tools necessary or the resources necessary to be able to maybe make his Joe Schmo best idea that's ever existed in the world, right? And so I think that there's slowly going to be more regulation, and it's going to be implemented very articulately, because the people who are making these regulations, they're not dumb. They know what they're doing. They're incredibly smart, and they want to have a fair, equal opportunity for everyone involved, and they want to have a good set of rules for people to follow. So I do think that it's going to keep growing. Governor Newsom's, just to go back to your direct question, it was more of like saying, hey, regulations are coming, right? They didn't really do a whole lot in saying what the regulations are going to be. I think that is just the warning saying, hey, everyone, get ready. Within the next 2 years, we're going to slowly start actually making some regulations on this stuff. So that's kind of my takeaway from it. Because I think what they're going to eventually do is just mainly go after the bad actors, like Rebecca was talking about, first and foremost. But eventually they're going to have to make up some type of, because it's not a security, it's not a commodity, it's not a currency, it's a combination of all the three, right? It's something different in and of itself. So they're going to have to make new regulations because it just doesn't fit in the traditional ones.
Great.
If that's a one-word answer, I apologize.
For as lawyers, this sounds like opportunity. This is
Absolutely.
great. Let's advise, let's defend, let's do both.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's great. That's growth. That's fantastic. That's job security for everybody. And
Exactly.
I welcome regulation. It's nice to have a set of rules of the road, you know, and then you can advise your clients, because then you know, here's the law, and here's what you should do, here's what you must do, and then it's up to the clients to decide if they'd like, you know, to follow that or not. Either way, for lawyers, it's great. So.
Yeah. No, I think you're completely correct. I think that compliance for this industry is going to be burgeoning pretty soon, because people are making a lot of money, right? And so, and they're going to want to follow the rules. And so if there is this regulatory body that's going to be finding people and getting people in trouble and maybe even sending them to jail, who knows? You're going to need to have a lawyer to help you navigate that, because it's not going to be easy, you know? So it's going to be a good industry to get into, I think, in terms of the legal aspect.
Great.
It certainly feels like the regulations are slow to come, actually.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's government for you and everything. But especially something like this. But it is coming. Like I said, there's a task force. IRS is the first one. DEA has had a little bit of involvement with crypto, but it's mainly IRS that's tracking it and focusing on tax evasion, you know, transactions and moving money and people trading and not in American, you know, either American-based transactions or Americans themselves, Americans abroad, you know, you're still taxed if you're abroad earning income. So IRS has lead for it now. I think eventually it will be FBI that probably jumps in too. And then DEA to some extent when it comes to money laundering and the product of criminal activity related to drugs.
Absolutely. I think that's going to be pretty prominent as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's turn to a few questions. We've got a few questions back on the crypto.
Okay.
Sarah Johnson. Again, my understanding is that you use the public key address, not the seller's party's wallet. Mm-hmm. Is there a difference between the wallet and the address?
The public address? No, that's essentially just your wallet. You got to think of it like an email address or a bank account number, right? And whereas the private key, so you have two keys, right? The first key is the public key, which is the 26 to 48 numbers that are just randomly sped out that you use as to buy and sell and engage in transactions. And then you have this thing which is called your seed phrase or your private key, which is a series of either 12 to 24 words that are completely made up. They're completely random. And that's like actually your password, but also your count at the same time. It's something that's very important. Like if you want to, like you don't want to store that thing digitally anywhere. If you create, I mean, let me take this back. This is for specific types of wallets too. So like if you have a Coinbase account, they do all that stuff for you. But if you're interacting with the live blockchain and you're interacting with actually no centralized intermediary, and you create a wallet on a wallet ledger, then you're going to be getting the private key and your public key. And so that private key, when you're interacting on the actual ledger with the, say, and I'm just using Bitcoin as an example, but pretty much every cryptocurrency chain does this. You're going to have a seed phrase. So it's 12 words. So like launch, turtle, apple, you know what I mean? Fun, water, the ocean, whatever, all these different things. And that's recorded on the chain, but it's private and it's encrypted, but it's your specific number for your wallet. So, but in terms of actually the public address and the public key it's the same thing. It's just a different wording for it.
Thank you. So Kwan Bjornbach, she has a question about the value. Bitcoin value fluctuates. What is the time to lock in the Bitcoin rate?
Rebecca, since you did one of these, you want to talk about that a little bit? Since you transferred the Bitcoin to USD, it's interesting talking about.
Yes. So the client, when he cashed out Bitcoin, he knew they always oversend. I always say you always want to oversend when you're going to do a transaction, because you don't want to be under, and then you have time limits to escrow and all that. So this client just, at the time that we did these transactions, we didn't have a huge market disruption. So things were pretty stable as they can be. And there's always a transaction fee for the conversion. And some of them are so steep. I'm like, this is a great business. Why am I a lawyer? I need to do this particular.
Like about how steep are you talking?
Yes. And so it was just all spelled out. And then in regards to the actual client interaction, the buyer is sophisticated in crypto. So he educates me all the time on things. He's great. So he sent, and it's instant. So when it's sent, there's no like, I'm going to send it. And then between me clicking it and deciding I got to put this number in and clicking it, that it's like this huge thing. So you calculate the transaction cost, add that to it, and then send it. And then we've had, a little overage on things. And I always recommend that we do that just for, something being smooth. Again, I don't like surprises. No lawyer really loves surprises.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what we did in practicality. That's how we managed the transaction.
So that's cool. So when did he liquidate his Bitcoin? Was it before when he liquidated the Bitcoin to get into USD to then transfer to the seller? What point in the process did that occur?
We did, because it's so fast, we just had a closing date, and I made sure the due diligence, I didn't do the actual real estate transaction like a real estate attorney looks to make sure that the title's clean. I don't do any of that. I don't know how to do that. And I'm not starting now because it's good for everyone. I don't do that.
Yeah.
So it's the bigger business picture of the client having an investment that I handle. And it's, I think day of closing, it was just boom, sent it, and it was there, and then they have it. So just like with your real estate funds, I have sent money over early once when we had like a buy deadline and everyone was traveling for Christmas, and there was no reason to wait. The title where everything was done, and we just sent it early, and they confirm receipt, and you can see it, you have it. Yeah. So yeah, it was really fast. That's the beauty of that.
I know, right? I was about to say, that's one of the coolest things is that you have the proof of funds right here, right? Yeah. So it's just there. There's no centralized, you don't have to go to clearinghouses. You don't have to go through sending the wire and the different banks and confirming it on each send, whether or not the bank has the liquidity or not. So it's just, that's the value of the coin, right? And so that's what the cool thing is that if you have 1,000 Bitcoins and at that moment, Bitcoin is at $30,000, you have what? 30 million Bitcoin, $30 million, right? And so send it over, and on there'll be a timestamp on the blockchain that you can actually go and read. When you go through and look up the ledger, it'll show the timestamp, it'll show the amount that the transaction was done. And if you really want to see how much it was worth at that time, you can always go counter reference the price of the Bitcoin when that timestamp occurred, right? And so that's a way that could potentially be used to say, hey, I paid, say the house is $30 million and Bitcoin was at 30,000 exactly. I sent exactly 1,000 Bitcoin. And now here's the timestamp to prove it. This is the price it was at. So now the funds have been settled because we agreed on this in this transaction point. So it's kind of cool how the blockchain records all that information.
I find that sometimes this like makes life easier. In my experience of transactions, it's new, it's different for people who haven't done it, but I find this to be so seamless once you figured it out. The only thing that makes me nervous is the wallet address and the type of crypto we're sending. And if the risk isn't on me, it's on the clients, but no one wants the transaction to go south and people to get mad and lose their money. But that's the only, I mean, I guess because we've done it, right? But I find it to be just like very easy.
Yeah, and two, it also to that point too, if you know the address, right? So say you sent that 10,000 before, right? You can go on the address that you sent it to and look up and say, hey, it's in your wallet. This is the address you sent me. It's there. And then so when you send the full amount, they can't say whether or not they didn't receive the funds because you can physically go in, look up their wallet on the ledger and actually see that the money was transferred from your account. You can say, nope, here it is. This XYZ W22 is my wallet. XYZ W2456 is your wallet. This is what you provided. This is where I sent it to. I can see the funds in your thing, in your account. And so we're good to go. It's gravy, you know?
Yeah. And that can be viewed by anybody. Is that right?
Anybody. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So anybody who has litigation over this, Thomas is available to be your subject matter expert. You just call him. He'll explain what he just said, and jurors are going to love it.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be perfect.
There's another question on risk here from Michael Scheinberg. So where is the language allocating risk to the buyer? I see language saying parties agree they're individually responsible and assume that all risk for sending and receiving the correct form of cryptocurrency to the correct wallet address.
Can we pull it back up?
Yeah.
Available.
So Michael's question is, where is the,
if we scroll
where is
down
the language?
We had a few different documents for this contract. It might have been in one of the other ones. So by agreement, okay, so we've got payment will be sent via the, what was the question? I'm sorry. Where does it allocate risk?
Yes, to the buyer.
It's not allocated to it's the parties themselves, receiving and sending. So the parties agree that they're individually responsible and assume any and all risk for sending and receiving the correct form of cryptocurrency to the correct wallet address. The parties agree the value of cryptocurrency may fluctuate. The buyer agrees to send the purchase price. So he chose to pay via Bitcoin. The seller agrees the value may fluctuate immediately after receipt, and the value may result in a lower or higher value than the purchase price. So the line that says, the parties agree they're individually responsible and assume any and all risk for sending and receiving the correct form of cryptocurrency to the correct wallet address. So it's on both of them. And I would suggest that you make sure that you have it on both of them, because you might have a seller sending something and the buyer gave them the wrong address, or excuse me, vice versa. The buyer sending something and the seller gave the wrong wallet address. Both parties need to be correct, where you're sending and where you're receiving. And they need to each individually assume that risk. That's how I view it. And I think, and if you're sending money and you're receiving, it's just like a bank wire. But like Thomas said, you can undo a bank wire, at least in the States. To the most extent, you can do that. This is just gone. So I would suggest a test payment. I think that really takes it out. And then having the clients handle the money part, if you're comfortable with it, it also takes it off the attorney then too, or whoever's involved in the transaction. But you can build this out however you want. For these clients, they're both sophisticated in crypto. They understood it. I put language in there just so everybody knew, and they know they're in the business. And that's an interesting issue too, because in the future of someone, I can see there being some litigation surrounding this once it becomes more common. And that'll be interesting to see how it's regulated and then what the recourse is. And if, you have rules of the road and laws of how that's handled, can we copy kind of how we do for bank wires? Will that ever change? Maybe not, because the nature of the crypto of the world of the cryptocurrency world and blockchain, it may never, it may be, nope, that's the risk. And you put it on there on the contract.
And as long as the seller puts their correct address, the onus then almost just by default falls on the buyer, because the buyer ultimately has to send it to the correct address, right?
Yep.
So like Rebecca said, if you are transacting with this, I would absolutely recommend that you do a test transaction first, because
You have just
you have
that's what you're doing. Just know that's what you're doing.
you have to do it.
$1.
Yeah. You have to do it, because there's no reversing it. So if you send it to the wrong thing, if you have the wrong numbers in, like she said, it's gone. You know, it's not coming back. You know, unless you find some person who receives $30 million worth of Bitcoin, and then they are like, oh, this isn't mine. Here, I'll send it back to you. Be nice. And that's not going to happen. You know, so it's just one of those things. But yes, I would absolutely send a test, because then, like we said earlier, you can go up and look up that wallet, and then you can say, well, I tested it. This is the wallet you gave me, and it's there.
I will add too, as I'm just reminded of this transaction. So we've done KYC at the beginning of a transaction when we're negotiating, showing proof of funds. I have had to do it on the back end as well when a client cashed out crypto into a bank, actually in Panama. And I had to explain this was a real estate transaction. I had to send a copy of it. It had to come on my letterhead. It had to be, I love it, but people trust US attorneys more than they trust like foreign ones, even their own country. They're like, you're US, okay. It's very helpful for your foreign-based clients. But for this transaction, I actually had to do it on the back end too, when they cashed out part of the transaction in Panama. So if you're doing it in El Salvador, it might be different, because obviously their banking system is more forward-leaning than Panama, like I mentioned before. But just wanted to throw that in there, that you may be doing KYC all over the place, the entire transaction, depending upon who you run into.
Yeah. I did see one really interesting question by Bruce, if you want to read that.
Yeah, I was just looking at that one. Bruce Hitchman, are there any indicators that major title companies are implementing NFT tech to capture a property's chain of title?
I don't know. So I don't know if there's any major companies implementing it. There have been major companies that have filed copyright and patents for it. And also it's funny, because I actually wrote a paper in 2016 on blockchain and recording mortgages and title and the note and how that works. I honestly think that NFT technology is the ultimate future for title recordings. I mean, it just makes it so much more efficient, so much more easier to record and then show who was there. Like, because like I said, it's got the proof stamp, the time proof, everything's recorded on the same spot. So it's something that people are starting to do, and it's going to take a little bit of time to implement it, because like title and deeds and all that, that's recorded by each jurisdiction and each local municipality. So you're going to need to have all of these local municipalities adopting some form of blockchain technology, or some NFT, DLT, whatever you want it to use, smart contract, to implement this and slowly expand upon it from there, right? Because like I said, the title, you have to go down to your local municipality and register your deed and record your title, right? So that's where it's going to have to happen first for it to really start expand more.
So in our lifetime, do you think?
Yeah, I think maybe in the next 10 years, I think 10 years is when it starts to really happen.
Thomas and Rebecca, how would you handle the FERPTA declarations and withholding, or CalFERPTA, if you're using crypto? Then you have no escrow involved. Isn't the lawyer on the hook?
I handle the transaction, the business. So I don't have any experience with that. I handle the KYC for the client and some of the negotiations, and then real estate and tax attorneys, my clients use the same ones, but I don't know. To answer your question, that goes to them. So I'm not sure.
If we don't have any other questions, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we're right on the hour at 1:30.
If questions arise, I'm happy to answer via email or talk via phone. I love this kind of stuff. I think that this isn't going anywhere. This is going to be huge and get bigger and bigger. So if anyone has questions they think of later, or just want to toss around some ideas, I'm sure Thomas and I are both available. So please reach out.
Yeah, I'll even when we release the materials, Kathleen, if you can just send out my email, I'd be happy to answer anyone's questions later, or even just discuss. I live, eat, and breathe this stuff basically every day. I advise several NFT projects and a bunch of different things. So I'm constantly trying to figure out where this is going and how it's going to evolve and develop. I just think it's fascinating, really fascinating, the technology, because it's basically giving the internet a memory, right? And that's never happened before. And so it's the building blocks for something bigger in the future. And we're starting to see that with NFTs. NFTs is the first real use case, other than just money transacting back and forth, that blockchain can really provide and create efficiencies and protections and just overall an upgrade of the existing infrastructure of the internet that we have. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for your time, Rebecca and Thomas, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.